Well, welcome back. Thank you, everyone, again for joining us as we prepare now for our lunch session. It is now my honor to welcome Christi Craddick, Chairman of the Texas Railroad Commission. Raised in a strong conservative household, retained as legal counsel by prominent Texas firms, and shaped by more than a decade as a trusted political advisor, Craddock has set a clear standard of integrity, self-reliance, and innovation in her position at the Railroad Commission. Since her tenure on the commission began in November 2012, Craddock has pushed to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of an energy industry that is driving the state's unparalleled economic success. In the process, she has repeatedly proven that sensible regulations, careful listening, and plain talk can foster innovation that has solidified Texas's leadership in the energy sector. Making it a top priority, Craddock has worked to educate the public about the oil and gas industry and its impact in Texas. She has fought against Washington's one-size-fits-all environmental policies that would kill jobs and stifle energy production growth. A native of Midland, the heart of the Permian Basin, Craddock earned both her bachelor's degree as a Plan II graduate and her doctorate of jurisprudence from the University of Texas at Austin. During her career as an attorney, she specialized in oil and gas, water, tax issues, electric deregulation, and environmental policy. Craddock serves her community as an active member of organizations including the State Bar of Texas, University of Texas Liberal Arts Alumni Advisory Council, and Dell Children's Medical Center Foundation. Christy resides in Austin with her daughter Catherine and is an active member of St. John Newman Catholic Church. Chairman Craddock.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for having me. It's odd not to be in front of everybody, so it's nice to be online, and hopefully in 2 years, you'll all be back. So thank you for staying engaged, though. It's important for the Permian Basin to come down and explain what you do and how important you are to the rest of the state. I think sometimes they forget it. So we have had an interesting year, I think, for all of us, and I thought I'd go through for a minute what we're doing at the Railroad Commission, kind of what's going on, and hopefully people have some good questions too. So today we are producing in this state about 3.98 million barrels of oil on any given day and about just under 28 BCF of natural gas. For those of you who've been in the up and down with us during the pandemic, and if you think about where we were last year, we were trying to figure out as a state what we were going to do when Saudi Arabia and Russia decided to have a battle in the oil and gas industry, and there were some other issues going on. We dropped to negative 37 about the dollars a barrel of oil about this time last year, but we're back up to about 60, give or take, today. And those production numbers aren't that far down, interestingly. We dropped a lot, and then we're back and we're recovering in this state. When you look at the state of Texas, just overall of those numbers, about 70% of our oil comes from the Permian Basin. So thank you all for keeping the state afloat, literally and figuratively. About 42% of our gas and 61% of our gas condensates also come from the Permian Basin. So a lot of production coming out of the Permian Basin for the state. When you look at where we are across the country, when you compare our almost 4 million barrels of oil a day and 28 BCF of natural gas, 700,000 barrels of natural gas liquids, that means that this state is producing roughly a third of the country's oil and the fourth of the country's natural gas. It literally is the biggest producer, and the Permian Basin is the biggest part of that. So that's huge and important for the state, but it's important for the Railroad Commission as well. Most of you know we do the oil and gas permitting, and oil and gas is our biggest piece, but we also do pipelines and pipeline safety inspections. Today we have about 470,000 miles of intrastate, and gathering line pipelines in this state. Somebody reminded me not too long ago that would take, that amount of pipe takes us to the moon and back. So we're now from NASA going back to the moon and then on to Mars, we at least can get to the moon and back on the pipes, the amount of pipes in this state. That's a lot of pipeline. We also do gas utilities in this state. So for those of you who have gas that goes into your home, we do the safety as well as rates for that. Those gas utilities have become even more important in the last 5 weeks ago as we all were trying to stay warm, and I'll go back to that in a minute. We also have mines, surface mines for coal in this state. Coal is an important piece for what we do, but remember, it's surface mines. We're not West Virginia where you go underground. So that's East Texas, And along our border with Mexico, we've got a couple of coal mines in our state. We also have uranium mines. I always like to remind people when we're talking about energy of all kinds, we've got it in Texas. And so we have uranium mines in this state. We do geothermal in this state. Both of those aren't very active today, but we have rules for both of those as well. And the other thing that we do, because we're ahead of the game and a lot of people are talking about it, we have carbon capture rules in the state that the Railroad Commission's had in place since roughly 2003. And we are using CO2 in enhanced oil recovery in both West Texas and down in the Houston area. So guess who's leading in that? We're the first ones to have rules in the country about CO2 and enhanced oil recovery. So for people who think this state isn't friendly to everything, we are really working on everything, and the Railroad Commission tries to be as up to date as possible and are continuing to work those issues. There's some other pieces of legislation going through right now that we're watching that again has to do with CO2 and pore space as well that we think could be helpful. So we're trying to be on the forefront of that technology as well. So when you look at what we do, I always say we're the most important agency in the entire state because we are the oil and gas industry. And the oil and gas industry today, as the legislature's in, is roughly a third of the budget that the legislature has, that they're working through. The dollars that are being brought in, a third of it's coming in from the oil and gas industry. That's a lot is on any given day, meaning roughly $30 million a day comes into the state from the oil and gas industry. Last year, the oil and gas industry put $13.9 billion with a B into the state's economy as far as taxes, meaning property taxes and sales taxes and school taxes and automobile taxes, but also this tax called a severance tax, which is what happens when you drill an oil or gas well. The operators pay a tax on and a percentage on what they're drilling and what they produce. Those severance taxes go to the rainy day fund. So that rainy day fund is really important. We started the legislative session, had roughly $10 billion in it, just over $10 billion, all from the oil and gas industry. Some of those dollars are being used today. About $1 billion comes out every year for schools, for permanent school fund. So that's important. We all know how important roads are. About $6.5 billion has come out over a multi-year period to road infrastructure, as well as $2 billion is being used in a bonding process over a 20-year period for water infrastructure. And if you live in the Permian Basin, you know how important water is, but it's important across this state as well. So you still take all that money out, and you've got $10 billion that the legislature is always looking to spend more money. And so we'll see where some of those dollars are used this cycle. That's part of the conversation right now. Last legislative cycle, the legislature used dollars for Hurricane Harvey because it did rain at one point, so we used the rainy day fund for rain event. They also used it for property tax and school relief last cycle. So they'll look at those dollars again going forward. But remember, the oil and gas industry really is paying not just one piece, but more than their fair share to keep the state afloat. This session we thought we were going to be looking at budget only, and that's a big piece for us. We are, like I said, as I started, we've had an interesting year in this industry. It has gone from $60 to a negative $37, and we're back to roughly $60 again. And that makes a big difference in the jobs and job creation. We've got roughly 400,000 jobs that are involved with this industry across the state. We've lost up to 100,000, we think, in the past year. Some of that's beginning to recover. That's a lot of jobs for people across the state. The average salary is about $120,000 in this state for an oil and gas job. That's not a bad salary for a lot of people too. I think that that keeps a lot of families afloat in this state. But the challenge we really have had is that we've watched the number of drilling rigs really drop almost to about 100 in this state. We're roughly at 200 today. That also means that our permit numbers are down as an agency, and we're fee-based as an agency. So when we've walked in the door this legislative session, we said, look, we appreciate we're fee-based, but our budget's off 30%. That's the highest number we've ever been off as an agency. And so think about when you're operating your business and somebody walks in and says, well, your budget's off 30%. You got to figure out how to cut, and you got to figure out how to manage that. So that's what we've been working through this year, and we'll continue to do so. So obviously one of the first things we did last April was quit hiring people unless we considered them critical. Critical for us as inspectors, quite frankly. That continues to be a priority for us as an agency. So we quit hiring people. We quit buying new trucks. Some of you have heard me tell this before. A few years ago in 14, 15, when we had a downturn in the industry, we quit buying trucks and everybody laughed at me. And I said, well, okay, would y'all like to go out to the oil fields and go do it in your nice little Prius? It doesn't work that well. You've got to have a nice pickup truck. And those are, you go out in the oil field, that's pretty tough on those trucks. And if we run them 150,000 miles a year and one of them doesn't work because we weren't able to buy a new truck, they can't get out and do their job. Our people can't get out and do their job. But we've quit buying trucks at this point. And so where we are and what we're down to is continuing to maintain good people. We've got about 853 people who work for us across the state in 10 field offices, Midland being our most active. But last year we opened one in Lubbock. Actually, we needed some workforce and we wanted to take some pressure off our Midland field office. We also have one in San Angelo, Abilene, Wichita Falls, Pampa, out in that area, and several others across the state. So our people are our most important thing that we have, I think, overall, and we've got a lot of great people who work for us. We're beginning to, as this pandemic is winding to its the new normal, whatever that looks like. We're beginning to open up our field offices again and our Austin office, and frankly, they've never closed. We've continued to have people in our offices. And people were out inspecting. We just didn't let people come in and see us. So we're looking forward to letting people come back in and see us on a regular basis. That being said, in this last year, we did 200,000 inspections across the state. That's a record for us. We plugged 1,400 wells in this past year. Again, kept us on track. And so as we're sitting in this legislative session, our comment has been to the legislature, we're doing our job. Our job isn't going away, by the way. I think the real opportunity for this industry and this agency is to reset again and to look and see where the new technologies and new efficiencies are, which we're looking for that like every other business is as we come out of this down cycle, and figure out how we are more efficient and more effective. But what we do know is technology continues to improve, and so we don't anticipate that the number of drilling permits this next year and the next few years to come will look like what they did in 2019. So we're trying to figure out how we continue to fund ourselves without raising fees and being smart about where we spend our dollars. So that's a conversation we're having with the legislature. The other thing, and I said we thought this was going to be a quiet session. So 5 weeks ago, the world changed in Texas as we were all frozen in. And then obviously in the Permian Basin, y'all were frozen in for 8 straight days, which I don't know if it's a record, but it's got to be pretty close. I don't remember Midland ever being that cold for that long, and that I have a history of. And obviously when Austin freezes, we all can't move because we can't go up and down a hill, and Austin drivers aren't that great. So they really don't know what to do. But this whole state really took a turn about 5 weeks ago. That was a priority for the Railroad Commission. Obviously, we are involved with gas and gas flow in this state. And so as we got into this storm on the Thursday, the 10th, we got a phone call from the Public Utility Commission saying, look, you have a curtailment order for natural gas, which we've had in place, by the way, since 1972. Can you reprioritize some things? We now are now recognizing that we could have some issues in this state. And we went, okay, we'll look at it. And by Friday night, we had reprioritized not just gas for you're going into your homes through gas utilities, and look, it's schools and it's hospitals and it's churches, and those are always, human needs will always be our priority going into your house. But we put as number 2, gas power plants should get gas, assuming they had firm contracts. That's the way the rule, because we have interruptible contracts too. They're at the bottom. But the priority became gas utilities first, and then gas power plants second, and those for human needs. Why gas utilities first? One, they have a good history in this state, and 2, if gas ever gets shut off to your house, we have to go house by house to turn it on. You have to get people out there, and so it is more time consuming and costly to do that. It's better to make sure the gas flows to your house first, and then obviously to those gas power plants second. So that was the priority that we did on that Friday night, and we thought that would help a lot, and I do think it helps some. What we've recognized in this state is about half the people get gas into their home for heat, and the other half the people are all electric, and that's something we need to, as a state, account for and think about going forward. Obviously, as we hit that Sunday night, Monday morning, I lost power like a whole lot of people did too, and I was one of those that was off for 4 straight days. So it isn't like any of us rolled, and no, I didn't have a heads up any more than anybody else did. But I will say this, and this is where I think the Permian Basin and the oil and gas industry really came to the rescue again for this state, is on the Tuesday, the 16th, as we're all on a lot of phone calls, as you might imagine, going on, trying to figure out how we can help this state get power, where we can continue to move gas in this state. We had pipeline companies, we had industry people all over the state, we had agencies on the phone trying to make sure gas was moving so we continue to have heat on and get gas to power plants as much as possible. And we have storage all over in this state of a lot of natural gas, and we were pulling max storage for about 5 days in this state, which again I think set another record. But on Tuesday the 16th, I got a phone call, started getting phone calls from the Permian Basin, and one came from a president CEO, and he said, look, I don't have any power at my house, I'm not calling about that. I went, okay. They said, but we now can get out in the Permian Basin, and particularly in the Delaware, it's going to start thawing out there today, but we don't have any power out in the oil fields. And I said, you what? So we don't have any power in the oil fields. And they said, we can't do anything without power in the oil fields. If you can get the power on, we can get the gas to flow, and we can help solve the problem. And I went, okay. So by that afternoon, I said, will you tell us where it needs to go? And can we work with PBPA, Permian Basin Petroleum Association, other associations, and let's start feeding information to the electric companies and start getting the gas back on in these oil fields, and getting the power back on so we can start flowing gas back into power plants and start moving forward, which we did by that Tuesday afternoon. And if you go look, Wednesday morning, we were on same call we were on every day. And they said, we're now getting 10% flow. And by Thursday, we're at 45% coming out of the oil fields. And it got the power back on in the state. Otherwise, we were stuck. And so I appreciate the Permian Basin and, frankly, the oil fields and the gas fields getting the power back on for us. And so what do we do now is the question, because we are, as the state that has the most energy of any place in the country, what do we do better? Look, as an agency, we've made some suggestions. Part of that has to do with mapping and prioritizing critical infrastructure. Nobody knew that there was an opportunity, from my perspective, to try to put some of the oil fields on the critical infrastructure list. In fact, if you go look at the form that it took us 2 days to find from ERCOT, they actually exclude the oil fields, but that prioritization needs to change. And so we've suggested as an agency mapping. If you go look at our website, you know that we have pipelines and oil wells mapped anyway. So we think that that makes sense to make sure we map where critical infrastructure is. We think we need that our ad hoc group that's been working through the years, Texas Energy Reliability Council, needs to be formalized. We'll go back and obviously relook at our gas curtailment order and make sure we're prioritizing, and we'll have a full hearing at the Railroad Commission about that going forward. And then, look, I think if you're a gas utility company, that you have that you're a power plant, you need to have firm gas, because how do we know where you need power or not? And I think that's part of mapping and building infrastructure and making sure the infrastructure works. And it seems to me there's other opportunities for things like storage. So I think that's part of what the legislature's really involved with this cycle. Was a hearing today in the Senate. The House has had lots of hearings. I think I've testified 5 straight days on this issue. This is important stuff, and we need to do it right and figure it out. But I will say this, the gas utility companies know how to do it. And so when I said we prioritize them because they serve 4.6 million households in this state. And of those 4.6 million households, only roughly 2,100 of those households lost gas during this. That means 99.95% of the people who had gas in their home, roughly 13 million people had gas the whole time and had heat. That's where we sure can learn a lot from what we've done right with the gas utilities and hopefully translate it over to the electric power utility world. And that's where I think the Railroad Commission can continue to move that forward. So the other piece we're obviously watching very quickly has to do with what's going on with the federal government. We've got a new federal government leadership, and they don't always appreciate, we found, the oil and gas industry historically. They've already shut down Keystone XL pipeline between the United States and Canada, and that's unfortunate. Our Keystone XL pipeline part's been flowing since 2013-14 in this state. We think that's an important business partner, and frankly, just partner, period. So is Canada. So are our friends in Mexico. So we hope that this administration doesn't completely shut down an oil field and or shut down the oil and gas industry. One, it's the job creator, frankly, in the country. And two, we're a little bit blessed, and I appreciate being in Texas versus New Mexico at this point. If you're looking at what New Mexico's challenges are for their state, they have about 50% of their lands are federal lands. That means they have to go through federal permitting at Bureau of Land Management if they ever get to permit again. It takes about a year to get a federal permit. And right now, this administration shut those permits down, at least for the first 60 days. And it looks like that will continue for how long, we don't know. If you're in Texas and you're on private property, which is what most of Texas is, we take 2 days to get a drilling permit out, and we're happy to have you. So I think that means potentially there could be a lot more opportunity coming to Texas as those federal permits stay in limbo. That being said, we need the federal government to understand what we do and work with us. We want to continue exporting. Exporting is important to us. Between liquid natural gas terminals that we have 3 in Texas, 2 are active, and the third one's broken ground, and we've got 2 others that are in permitting process. We build a lot of pipe in this state, and we have 2 of our ports, both Houston and Corpus, are both net exporters for energy products. So what we do in Texas goes around the world, whether it's LNG that's going to Poland, who, they don't want Russian natural gas, or South Korea or Japan, or you get natural gas exports that go all over the world. This is important for us as a country to make sure we continue to be part of the conversation and it's important for our national security long-term, I believe. So when you look at oil and gas, while this new federal administration thinks that they're going to go completely green, and look, we can show them a few things too. We have solar and windmills sitting right out in the middle of West Texas too. We have a diversified grid in this state, and that's important to us. But picking against natural gas or coal when they're not going anyplace, and frankly, wind doesn't blow without natural gas, it's not a smart way to do things. So that's where we hope to continue to work with them. We'll see if they figure that out. If not, you're going to watch 3 commissioners and a whole state push back pretty hard about whatever Green New Deal they come up with, and or any other ideas that don't make a lot of sense when you look at energy. I think that Texas is a good example of what we do well. So, so I think, but I don't think that we're going to lose oil or natural gas in the short or long term. I think this industry is going to be around for a long time. It's important not just to this state for the jobs it creates, but also for the country, for the jobs and the national security it creates as well. So I appreciate y'all having me. And if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I think that this industry's got a long way to go with some challenges, and we look forward to working through those challenges with this industry as we go forward.
Thank you, Chairman Craddick. We appreciate you being here as well. We do have a few questions. I was jotting down some questions, and you answered most of them through your speech. So I'll take those offline. But one question we did have that came in relation to the winter storm last month. Can you explain a little bit of the structure of the commission and ERCOT and that relationship and how that works and what you guys have done in the aftermath of the storm?
Sure, and I think that's important. And it's the communication piece is where we always can improve after anything. So we don't work with ERCOT day to day. We do work with the Public Utility Commission some, but when we've looked at storms since I've been there, we've looked at summer stuff. And so it's always been about the summer. We've really, literally, since I've been at the commission, never talked about winter. And so this was important for us to continue having good conversations. But as far as three agencies during the time period, the Texas Energy Reliability Council, which is really been housed historically at the Railroad Commission. And again, it's an ad hoc committee. We hope that the legislature decides to formalize it much more so. But that group started talking on the Friday, the 12th, and part of that group was the PUC, the Railroad Commission, and ERCOT. So we'd all get on a daily call, the big pipelines in the state, the gas utility companies, the electric utility companies, operators from all over the state. We get on a daily call and say, we've got gas here, we've got a problem here, the electricity's here. We were sharing and had a lot of communication during that time period. And so, but as far as the day-to-day planning with ERCOT, we haven't been involved with that. And so we'll see, hopefully we are better engaged communication-wise between ERCOT and PUC past this. Again, we've always focused on summer, and so winter focus and weatherization, whatever that means for this industry as the legislature's talking about it, I think is a continued conversation. And look, I think that's where Texas, when you talk about winterization versus weatherization, there's a difference. And so because we've had a lot of conversations and looked all over the country, because we want to be, again, in front of things instead of behind if we can. And as people kept saying, you ought to weatherize or winterize. So we went, okay, well, let's go call some people. There are other people in the country that do things smart. Let's go call them. And so we've looked across the country. There are no statutes or standards for weatherization or winterization. And so when you go talk to somebody like in Alaska for winterization, they say, yes, we put a metal building around a compressor and that's what we do. And I said, okay, that's great. And they said, but we don't have the summer issues like you do. And so I said, well, what would you do differently? And they said, well, you'd either have to take the building down every year or you'd have to put air conditioning in it because those compressors will burn up in the summertime. We don't have that problem on the North Slope. So I think finding common sense standards is going to be one of the challenges because, the Northeast doesn't have the same heat that we do. But what they do have more so, if their electricity goes down or if they have a problem, they have a lot more storage. And so I think that's one of the things that Texas has an opportunity to build and develop is more dry natural gas storage. We've built some storage out in the last few years that's wet natural gas, meaning natural gas liquids, but not as much dry gas. So I think those are conversations we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah, and also there's some talk in the chat as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the diversification of the energy sector here in Texas and some of the things we are doing to do that?
Sure. When you look at Texas, and I will always tell you that I think natural gas and oil are the best. But remember, we've got nuclear, and so we have 2 nuclear power plants. By the way, one of them went down during this process, and like anything, and not the whole thing, but part of that plant went down. Well, you can't just flip a switch on anything, by the way, and it takes 3 days for those nuclear power plants sectors to come back up. We have natural gas, and some of those natural gas plants didn't get natural gas. One, they didn't have firm gas, or they had freeze-offs because their equipment wasn't weatherized, or whatever the issues were. We had problems with coal, by the way, and coal plants. Again, some of their equipment wasn't weatherized, and we had coal piles get frozen. Now you can go heat those up and get those going, and that's part of what happened. And then we are one of the biggest states for alternative energy for as far as solar and wind. I mean, you live out in West Texas, you know we've got a lot of wind, and about 10% of our grid is basically wind, but they don't expect to run in the winter time. So and wind didn't blow, and we sure didn't have any sun for 8-9 days. So none of those alternative energy sources are great sources for Texas in the wintertime, which means you're back relying on natural gas, coal, and nuclear. And so that's where I think people need to understand all energy is important. We're in a high growth state, but you've got to go back to what works. And for us, we know that natural gas, nuclear, and coal work. And we know that wind works sometimes and solar works sometimes, but they aren't going to work well when you've got 8 days of freezing and no sun comes out. So I think those are going to be the challenges. So picking one versus the other, look, we're in better shape than California. And I was on a U.S. congressional hearing yesterday that I testified in, and one group all liked wind and one group liked everything else, right? It's the politics of it. But you look at California, they think they're going to get completely off of natural gas. They've gotten off of coal, and they think they're going to go straight to wind. And they're kind of trying to get off of nuclear, but think they're going to go to wind and solar. That doesn't work for them either. They have more outages and more problems than we do, right? So I think a little bit of everything works well. I think there's opportunity, though, for more natural gas-fired plants in this state, and definitely more storage in this state.
I wonder if you can speak to a little bit of the GROW bill that Representative Craddick is behind, your father, and how that's going to help us hopefully get some funding back out here in West Texas.
Look, I say the 2 challenges we always have in this industry, one is people, which I've kind of talked about, and 2 is infrastructure, right? Whether you've got to have enough pipes, you've got to have enough rail, and you really need to have enough roads. And so I don't think this industry is going away. I think it will continue to literally grow. And it is the bill that he's been working on for the last couple of cycles, I think would make sure that West Texas gets road money. Look, you put a truck on our roads out in West Texas, it sure tears them up and we put a lot of trucks on those roads. And look, I live in Austin, and you go drive to Houston and everybody thinks that's where the traffic is. And okay, volume wise, maybe, but volume wise of the economic driver is sitting out in West Texas and is sitting in the oil fields, and that needs as much dollars. And it's unsafe at the end of the day to put big trucks and put the volume of people that we've grown in this industry out in West Texas without putting dollars behind it to make sure those roads are safe and that we have enough roads. So I'm hopeful for that. He appreciates, I appreciate too, knowing this industry is going to continue to develop and grow, that we need to have those dollars. So as you're talking across, not just today, but going forward, make sure that this community understands and explains what Midland Odessa does. And I think that's what sometimes gets lost in the conversation is you're the job grower in the state, but y'all don't always get your fair share of money. And it's important, I think, going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chairman Craddick, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I speak for many of us out here. I say it's good to have a West Texan down there fighting on our behalf. So again, thank you so much for joining us and for your presentation today.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I believe we have the video finally queued up and ready for to show everyone from Governor Abbott. So I think if you will bear with us a minute, we will get that ready to go.
Hi, this is Governor Greg Abbott. I want to say thank you to the Odessa and Midland Chambers of Commerce and to your members for your tireless work to keep Texas the economic engine and the energy capital of the United States of America. This past year has been challenging as our state has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the challenges, Texas is the top state in America for economic development. And with businesses now able to open 100%, we will continue to unleash the full might of the great Texas economy. Now, of course, we realize we must do more to support Texas businesses and their employees. And that starts with protecting the energy industry from an overreaching federal government. That is why I issued an executive order to ensure that every state agency in Texas will challenge any federal action that threatens the energy industry in Texas. I'm also working with the legislature to pass laws that will grow the economy and protect jobs for Texas workers. That includes civil liability protections for businesses as well as individuals who operated safely during the course of the pandemic. It also includes legislation to bolster our infrastructure, cut red tape, and invest in workforce development. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but by working together on these solutions, we will ensure that Texas remains the premier economic destination in America. Thank you for the role that you play. May God continue to bless you in your efforts, and may God continue to bless the great state of Texas.
Well, thank you all for your interest again in joining us for this legislative update. I'd like to take a moment again to thank all of our sponsors for their support of today's programming. Now we'd like to move into our breakout sessions. We'll have a short break before those start. Each session will be moderated by our great volunteers at the Odessa and Midland Chamber of Commerce. We hope you'll stay with us. At the end of the second set of breakout sessions, our program will conclude. I'd like to take a moment again to thank you all for being with us today, to thank our sponsors. Our breakout sessions will start at 1:15. You can access these by navigating to the sessions menu on the left side of your screens. Again, the meetings will begin at 1:15. Thank you.